Welcome back to MTR. I got an Instagram message regarding a review of Ghost Love Score, and I perceived the message to be saying that it was somewhat of a criticism in a negative kind of way. So I thought I'd take a look at this and correct a few things in my opinion. This was done by Virgin Rock, who's at the time of filming currently sitting at 19.6 thousand subscribers. Now, let me make something really clear here. She has had a channel for probably around a month, and she's grown really quickly. And the reason for that is because of her knowledge. And also, you have a person who is claiming that they have never heard or listened, at least meaningfully, to rock music before. Now, it sounds unbelievable. And this is Amy. She is a classically trained pianist and harpist. The world of music theory knowledge she's bringing, and then at the same time we know that rock harmonically draws so much from classical music. So I do believe it that she hasn't heard a lot of these, if not any of these before, but it's a bit weird. It's a little bit weird. Anyway, check out our channel because you will find some great stuff here, but I did expect to see a lot more negativity in the comments, which is really good because I feel like Amy was very diplomatic. Anyway, let's see what's going on here. I'm not going to do a commentary on her whole video, but I'm going to take a look at some of this with the view of having Tuomas at the center of it.
And this is the second half of my Nightwish experience. And if you didn't get to hear the first half, you can click this link here to find it.
I really like her setup, by the way. I'm actually quite envious.
It didn't take me very long to go through this piece. Some of the songs I've listened to up till now have taken me several days of just intense listening and studying and trying to get my head wrapped around it. This one really didn't take me more than a day. So I understand that this song is very popular.
Okay, one thing on that. No, it's not very popular. The reason why I'm saying that is because it's not known by mainstream listeners. It's known by people who love Nightwish and people who do reactions. The reason why it's popular is because people have been baited into reacting to this for one reason, and one reason only, is to see Floor's final 3 notes. And I did have a video on that and the impact of that if you want to check it out as well. So no, this is not a popular song. Yes, this is popular in the community of reactions for the reason why I explained. And people do it to get more subscribers, and they don't realize they're doing it for that reason. People just say, hey, do Ghost Love Score. They do Ghost Love Score, the channel blows up, and then they're going to do more Nightwish. So it's mainly for Floor, because no one's saying do Ghost Love Score for Taria.
Some people in the comments have referred to the Nightwish army. So it seems like there is a certain audience which really loves the band Nightwish. Several of the commenters which recommended this piece to me mentioned that there are some unusual, kind of unique time signature changes and rhythmic elements in the song.
And we'll go into that soon.
I'm not familiar enough with the rock music scene to know how common that is. But I've listened to, I guess, 5 other rock songs up till now, one of which was Metallica's And Justice for All.
Yeah.
And I did notice in Metallica
1989.
there were some really interesting time changes and some quite complex rhythms.
I think with heavy metal, we really are dealing with a lot of that. Metallica, for example, and I'm a big Metallica fan, and I feel like in most of their pieces of music, at least their longer ones, there are lots more time signature differences and changes than Ghost Love Score. The big problem here is Amy is, unfortunately, because she doesn't have as much of a knowledge of rock, is lumping things into the same category. We know that Nightwish is not the same as Metallica. Metallica is heavy metal. Nightwish is symphonic metal. And we know that with rock as an overall style of music, there are so many branches. And what's happened is Amy has dived in to exposing herself to various rock artists, which are from different branches. So Metallica, Pink Floyd, already two different, stylistically different artists. Queen, the Beatles, and Nightwish. Every single one of those artists I mentioned are so different. And I think when people say there are different time signatures here in Ghost Love Score, which is true, again, it's coming from a fan base who is not there comparing, but just stating a fact. And they're not that complicated. So I think what Amy is kind of been exposed to, she's drawing comparisons which are not necessarily fair. The time signatures we're dealing with here are 6/8, 5/8, and 4/4. That's it. So I understand her perspective. So when looking at that, we've got starting in 6/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it quickly goes to 5/8 for one bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, of course, that key change. Oh, we're also dealing with 3/4. Sorry. So 6/8, 5/8, 4/4, and 3/4. And what's happened here compositionally is Tuomas has used this time signature change and transported it into a 4/4 and 3/4. In the first section, he's got 6 quaver beats or 6 8-note beats, and then he takes one away and makes it 5. Then when he moves into the same kind of idea, but for 4/4, he has 4 crotchet or 4 quarter note beats, takes one away and changes to 3/4, then goes back in. So there's that parallel there. Here's where it changes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So compositionally, there's this parallel between compound time and taking away one of those quaver beats, and then simple time and taking away one of those crotchet beats. That is quite intense in terms of music theory, but it's not that revolutionary. But at the same time, I think what's really important here is to understand that Tuomas has taken a set of time signatures which are very contrasting and done similar things to each other, to them.
Piece, amazing or not amazing. It's more a question of how is it used, what effect does it have on the music, and how does the music all come together?
It has a great effect, and the music comes together really well, and we'll talk about that soon.
This song had some time signature changes, okay?
Correct, yes.
That's true. But I don't see that as being something that makes it an incredible piece of music.
No, it doesn't. It's everything together. So Amy has unfortunately taken things quite literally, because she's dealing, and we'll see this many times, she's dealing with people who don't have objectively as much music knowledge as she does and as much music training as she does. So that when they say, oh, there's lots of different timings and lots of different complex rhythms and different time signatures, that's not what makes a piece great. That's part of what makes a piece great. But we need to kind of see this from a less literal perspective. Whilst Amy is looking at this objectively, we need to look at this from a contextual perspective. There is a really, really significant reason why Tuomas has used these time signatures in the first section, and then exploring, I guess, different sections. And we're going to look at that because this is the crux of my argument here today in regards to Tuomas, which is what I believe Amy didn't manage to pick up in her analysis. So stay tuned, because we're going to be looking at why and what effect those time signatures had by the end of the piece.
The song, the design and shape of the song, is kind of 2-part and kind of 3-part. By that I mean that in the performance that I listened to,
kind of,
there was a first half, and then there's kind of blank spot, interlude something, and then a second half.
Okay, so by blank spot, interlude something, she means, I believe this is what she means here. And again, we're going to talk about that soon, because that played a lot of a part on Amy's criticisms to this.
I'd say that it's in 2 parts, although when I listen to the music itself, I tend to say it's more 3 parts because of how the song is set up in terms of melodic lines and and structural design. So I
Look, I tend to agree if we are going to discount the introduction. You know what? I'm best off showing you. Introduction, if we're going to call this on the macro structure level, we're going to call this one section. That includes the 4/4 part. And then I would call the second section the verse, which is quite different because you have your vocals coming in, but it's gone into a major key. And the tempo has gone straight down. So we're going to call that one section from a macro structure perspective, which includes the chorus. So that includes the chorus. And then we hear that again. So that's our second section from a macro structure perspective. Macro meaning the big picture here. Then there is this section which I feel like stands on its own, in my opinion. And then, of course, we have the guitar, electric guitar, mimicking that melody, which Amy later on actually brings a criticism about, which we'll talk about soon. Then we have the interlude, which she spoke about. So far we have 3 sections. The interlude, let's not count this as part of the macro structure. Then we have this section in 6/8. So far that's introduction, first large section. Next, Siren from the Deep Came to Me section. This section, which is 4, and then that's pretty much it, because we head back, as we know, into the introduction. And then, of course, the first verse, this time in a minor key. Anyway, that was a lot. That was a lot of information. But let's see what Amy has to say.
Kind of relate to it more as a 3-part piece of music rather
but I
than
see where she comes from.
2-part.
The reason why she relates to it as a 3-part piece of music is because she sees the introduction, I think, as one part, the whole vocal part in the middle as one part, which I understand why, and then the 6/8 Bring Me Home and Leave Me Be part as another section.
So the way I tend to think of it as being laid out is you have the opening part and then the first verse or 2, however it is set up, where the voice is singing this nice, long, fluid lines. And then, then there's kind of a transition, some breaks and stuff happening. And then a while later, there's in my first listen, I called it the sea shanty moment.
Yeah, I see where she's coming from with that, because I actually got a Pirates of the Caribbean feel with that 6/8 bump 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 bump. Sea shanties are usually in 4/4, but I think she's feeling the sea shanty because it's very much following that harmonic progression of a sea shanty, or even like What Should We Do with the Drunken Sailor or Pirates of the Caribbean. And I think that's where she's kind of feeling that. So I don't think it was really about much except for the harmony there that she's spoken about sea shanty.
And I guess that's where I feel the second significant section is, in that sea shanty section. And then later the piece kind of returns to these long vocal notes that kind of create a sustained melody type.
And now we come to the crux of this. Metal Mozart. Tuomas Holopainen. Did I say his name right? Let's see what she has to say.
I read over and over again in the comments recommending this piece to me that the composer, Tuomas Holopainen, he's the composer and the keyboard player, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And people like to refer him as the metal Mozart. And as I said in the first listen video, that set me up with some expectations.
Here we go. The crux of this critique, we're 7 minutes in, of a 30-minute video, is that a classically trained musician who has allegedly never heard rock music, or at least heard it properly before, is confronted with expectations of a Mozart-like rock composer. This is dangerous because Mozart composed, he lived from 1756 to 1791. He did a massive amount of stuff in his lifetime. His life was cut short. Who knows what he could have achieved? But right now, unfortunately, even though Amy is incredibly diplomatic about this, it breeds elitism a little bit, because what we're dealing with here are people who are not as musically trained, probably haven't heard much Mozart before. If you ask somebody who doesn't know anything about music, what is the first composer you can tell me? The answer is Mozart, because he was amazing and he was awesome at what he did. So really what we're talking about here is Tuomas is amazing, awesome at what he does, and I would say quite revolutionary, and that is the only reason why. But soon you'll see that Amy starts to draw comparisons between Mozart and Tuomas in favor of Mozart.
You know, maybe I know that metal is not classical, and I wasn't expecting something classical.
Yes.
But I was expecting something perhaps more profound, or more developed, or more rich in meaning or artistic expression.
Okay. More profound, developed, rich in meaning, or rich in artistic expression, or more artistic expression. If you're going by the standards of Mozart, these are different from today. Yes, you can objectively call music good through analysis. But my opinion about Mozart, I actually personally find his music more difficult to listen than his contemporaries like Beethoven, Schubert, even going into the 20th century where harmony starts getting more complex with timing. I love listening to things like composers like Stravinsky, Shostakovich. So I personally find it more hard to listen to Mozart because I find the harmonies more interesting than the ones used in Mozart's time. Not to mention the kind of timbres and tone colors explored through a larger orchestra. Yes, that is subjective, but what, according to people who like Mozart, Amy, what is rich in meaning? Is it rich in meaning because of the lyrical content in Mozart's operas? If not, then this aspect of meaning is so subjective that people end up finding their own meaning. Or what about artistic expression? Is it because Mozart was so revolutionary for his time that you expected somebody who was just as revolutionary, if not more? On the flip side of this, if all that Amy has listened to is select rock songs, she presumably may have missed out on the development of rock music until she listened to only 4 or 5 songs, which was so different. So this is a message to viewers and fans. We need to be really careful on who we speak to in regards to how we address someone like Tuomas as a composer. If you call him metal Mozart to somebody who has only listened to classical music and studied classical music in depth and probably knows so many Mozart pieces, operas, concertos, symphonies, sonatas, then of course this person is going to start drawing comparisons, and it doesn't do any favors.
I don't want to give the impression that classical music is all the greats and nothing is mediocre.
And this is why she's doing well, and she will do well and continue to do well for her channel. She's humble, and that is so important because nobody wants to see somebody who is just bashing on something. Now, she may have wanted to, but that's not going to do any favors for her in growing her channel, in her showing that she's open-minded to a style of music which she hasn't heard before.
I have a lot of mediocre classical music, and,
yes,
and there are plenty of pieces that I could easily never listen to again in my life and never miss. And even the great composers, say Mozart or Beethoven or Bach, they wrote music that was pretty mundane and ordinary.
Oh, that is a very important point. Let's make sure we remember that. These composers wrote pieces of music which were very, as Amy said, mundane or ordinary.
Not
well.
everything they wrote is some grand inspired work of art. That's the way things are. I just want to use this as a little illustration of kind of the experience I had listening to this. I'm going to use Mozart because Mozart is what was put in my mind. If Mozart hadn't been suggested to me, I would have never imagined to compare this piece to Mozart.
See, this is the issue. We're dealing with a mindset at the moment because Amy is new to this and she is growing and she's going to be experienced to so many different kinds of people and so many different kinds of pieces of music that she'll actually begin to understand the way that I see it anyway. Because this is quite early in her channel, why there are people who use the word Mozart loosely. And unfortunately, while I understand why she has the opinion she does, this is where I think that it's really nitpicking in a meaningless way. But it's really difficult to be judgmental because she's really likable. She's a very likable person. She's good at speaking. Her videos are very clearly unedited. But Metal Mozart is just a saying.
Suggested to me, I would have never imagined to compare this piece to Mozart. So
Okay.
I feel like what I'm doing is kind of unfair.
Yes, but not for
at
the
same
reasons
time,
why you think it is.
It was suggested to me and put in my mind, and so I can't help it. Mozart is known for his incredibly beautiful, elegant melodies.
Okay.
Memorable, colorful, expressive, funny. All you have to
Oh, okay. Wait a second. Let's go back on that again.
Mozart is known for his incredibly beautiful, elegant melodies. Memorable,
Wish I had an angel for one moment of love. I wish I had your angel tonight.
colorful, expressive, funny.
Maybe we're pushing it a little bit with the skeleton dance.
To illustrate the difference that I was feeling, there's this piano sonata here, which starts out, and you might recognize it. I picked one that's fairly well known. It's the piano sonata in A, and it starts like this.
She's got a really good setup. I'm actually really envious.
And even just that little bit of opening melody, you hear such a rich layer and connection of a simple line, but it's so beautifully sculpted that it has a really deep impact on the listener.
Okay. Yes, but do all Mozart pieces start off with a single, simple, beautifully sculpted melody line, as Amy has put it? Mozart can't be defined by this in refutation of the artistic merit of another composer, Tuomas Holopainen, because of one song. How is this 8-bar melody more beautiful and impactful to the listener than this?
For the arcade, we are singers of the calm. We remember as the longing life.
The difference is, whilst Mozart relies on some harmonic and melodic development, albeit based on the sonata form, in the case that I just played, Tuomas takes a melody and repeats it over and over and over for 5 minutes with tiny rhythmic changes, little harmonic change, but with a slow growing, colourful accompaniment, with each reiteration of the melody more powerful than the last. But it sounds absurd to compare the two, doesn't it? Tuomas is using all the advances of technology that the 21st century has to offer, with hundreds of years of Western music behind him, which he can draw from. It's as if he has an unfair advantage over, let's say, Mozart, who is using all of the advances of technology of the 18th century with maybe 150 years of solid Western music to draw from. The conclusion here? This is time relative. I know Amy stated that she wasn't expecting a classical piece of music, but whilst there are some objectivity, or there is objectivity in her analysis, it is riddled with subjectivity in the sense that she's drawn on one piece of music from a 21st century composer, comparing it with a piece of music from an 18th century composer on the basis of melody line, melody only. Beautiful, colourful, elegant melodies which are not the sole basis for judging a composer. Which means this comes back entirely down to her interpretation of Metal Mozart, which is literal, just completely literal. There is objectively nothing literal about the term Metal Mozart, as I discussed earlier. This needs to be reiterated. Metal Mozart is solely a term used to describe Tuomas as a phenomenal composer. That's it.
Okay, I was expecting something else, and now what? It's over? I didn't find it. I have listened to a total of 5 other pieces of music considered to be in the rock genre.
In the broad genre of rock music. Let's make that point really clear.
And of those 5, 3 of them have included something which I've learned is called the guitar solo. And I have gotten quite a rapid education on how important the guitar solo is to the music. And it's kind of funny because a lot of you have said, please don't stop in the middle of the guitar solo.
It's illegal to stop in the middle of the guitar solo. I've done that too. I completely sympathize with Amy there because I've been in that position.
And here I am just bulldozing on and stopping wherever I please, and it's making you all sit there in pain. But I want to tell you that in this song, Ghost Love Score, there was a moment, even though I've only heard, I think of the 5 pieces, of the 5 songs I've listened to, 3 of them have had significant guitar solos. There was Metallica, Pink Floyd, and Led Zeppelin. And you can look up my first listens of those bands. And I guess I was expecting something similar with Ghost Love Score. There was a moment where the crowd kind of grew silent, a little bit quieter at least. I wouldn't call it silent. And the singer stopped, and it felt like we were set up for this guitar solo moment.
Amy is missing a fundamental understanding of different genres here when it comes to rock or subgenres. And I can't blame her because she's been thrusted into this. She's got a very appealing YouTube handle or YouTube name, Virgin Rock. It's almost unheard of to hear of people who haven't heard rock music before, especially artists like the Beatles. Metallica, yes, but I'm talking about fundamental artists like the Beatles. Amy has not really heard before. So when saying Led Zeppelin, Metallica, and Pink Floyd, that there's a significant guitar solo in those subgenres of rock demand there to be a guitar solo. It's a core part of their pieces of music, especially Metallica being heavy metal. So we know guitar solos are present in metal music, or much of metal music, and hard rock music. Its purpose is to show the virtuosity of a guitar player, quite like a trumpet solo in, for example, Louis Armstrong piece of music, or a extended cadenza at the end of an aria. That's something more relatable to Amy, I think.
It felt like we were set up for this guitar solo moment. It started and I was expecting it to build up, and then it never materialized. It was such a weird experience because I'm so new to this kind of music, and yet already I had this sort of expectation of...
Yeah. Like we have said before. Expectation of a genre which is not the same. A guitar solo at the level of Metallica or Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin would have absolutely ruined this piece of music. It doesn't belong there. Guitar solos need to fit in structurally, drawing on from harmonic and melodic themes which have already been established. And most importantly, they're showy. They're showing off. And they should be able to do that. But Ghost Love Score isn't that. Ghost Love Score in itself is the show. A journey through multiple seemingly unrelated sections, where Tuomas holds off using the dominant seventh chord to the tonic for over 10 minutes, as I discussed in another video of mine, whilst Mozart plays his hand loosely at the end of bar 8 and definitively at the end of bar 16 in the piano sonata which Amy showed earlier. That's not to discredit Mozart, because we can see that the intentions were different. It's stylistically appropriate in Mozart's case. A guitar solo in the same vein of the three bands which Amy mentioned would detract from this journey.
In this Ghost Love Score, it wasn't there, and I guess I missed it. What the guitar actually did was to simply repeat the singer's melody that she had just finished singing. Well, that is also sometimes done musically. So again, I'm not saying that... That's what happened. We get a reiteration of this simple, beautiful melody which we just heard from Flor, who's the vocalist in this case, on the electric guitar, with a few bars of a little improvisation actually at the end, which pays homage to the style using a guitar. This is still a guitar solo, paying homage to the metal style, but not disrupting the journey for this particular piece of music. There's that improvisation. It's small. It's tiny. Yeah, it's not the same as Metallica, Pink Floyd, or Led Zeppelin, but it can't be. These styles and the function of the guitar solo are not comparable. As Amy continues to progress through understanding and finding out more about rock music, she will learn that there are different expectations for different subgenres of rock. There, she may learn to appreciate them as an art form, but of course she's going to eventually start forming her own subjective view on what she enjoys better, which is normal. We all do that. But I had so many expectations, not only that the comments set me up for, but that the music itself set me up for along the way. Nobody told me to expect a guitar solo, but the music made me feel like there ought to be one.
Interesting.
And then that expectation was never fully met.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it did, because...
That was interesting to me as I went through the piece.
The way that I see it is because of the nature of it as a symphonic metal piece. I feel like it doesn't, because a guitar solo is a lot more prevalent in a small rock ensemble.
It does have three melodies in it.
Yeah.
And they're distinct one from the other. I also read along the way of my research that this song is sometimes called, well, some people say it's the perfect example of a rock opera. I had to go do a little bit of research.
Who said that? I'm not sure that it is. If you're taking the opinions of people who may not have as much musical training, and whilst I commend Amy for saying that no, it's not, and correcting those people, it's really necessary to understand that these people don't have the same kind of expertise in music that Amy does. The majority of people are going to make sweeping generalizations because they're not experts.
I've heard this term rock opera shared around. I had never, up until just the last day, looked to see what really is different between a classical opera and a rock opera. But I had to, because when I got done with this song, I was like, is there anything operatic about that? Is there anything in the form or structure that is what would be defined as opera?
I think it's fair that she's confused.
I went to look and see what is rock opera.
Because this is how she's learning, and this is how we're learning. When I actually think opera in general, in a contemporary perspective, I think modern day musicals, because modern day musicals are really drawn from opera because they're stage productions in that respect. When I think of rock opera specifically, I think Andrew Lloyd Webber. I think Phantom of the Opera, because that encapsulates the drama behind operas. The love triangle between a helpless soprano, a valiant tenor, and a scheming baritone. There's no dialogue in rock operas like there's no dialogue in operas. But there is an overture. An aria. A love song.
Love me, that's all I ask from.
And a dramatic ending where the main characters are singing over each other so that the audience don't really know what they're saying, but it still sounds pretty cool.
His life is now a prize which you must earn.
Add in the rock instruments, and you have a rock opera. Well, it's not exactly the same as an opera, but it does have the key elements, and I think that's what Amy is trying to explain here. So on that note, I don't think Ghost Love Score is a rock opera. It does take you on a musical journey, but I don't think it's by definition a rock opera, and that's what Amy is saying here, I believe.
To me, it is movie score music. Perhaps with some extra little solo elements thrown in because it's not put.
This is rather difficult to hear because it's far from movie score music. Is Amy referring to this part? I think Amy is somewhat diplomatic here, as she is with her whole analysis, as so not to offend people, and that's fair enough. But maybe, and I could be wrong, I feel like there's a generalization on Amy's part from hearing an orchestra which is not an 18th century one, and that is an orchestra which is considerably larger, where the composer is able to explore different kinds of timbres and combinations of sounds. I'm absolutely not saying that Amy doesn't understand 19th century orchestral music or even film music, but I'm merely noting that the reference to metal Mozart may have her views frozen in a particular type of orchestra in the context of this analysis, and subsequently conflating 21st century orchestration with movie scores.
This song had places where it was essentially nothing. Sometimes the music that was happening was exactly what you would hear on a movie soundtrack.
Okay, yeah. So she's talking about that interlude that I just played. And yeah, I absolutely see where she's coming from. And in this respect, it's important to acknowledge that the song does have meaning. Otherwise, we can just dismiss the lyrical content as garbage and irrelevant. So maybe some of the colorful orchestration here can be interpreted as something you may find in a film score, as there is a story behind it. But it's not nothing. To call it nothing is diminishing what it really is trying to foretell. Take a listen to the little clarinet part here, and it gets repeated a little bit later as well, to really illustrate what I'm talking about. Let's hear it again, just to really solidify what I'm saying. Take a listen. And we hear it again later. In the lower, I'm pretty sure it was a brass instrument like a tuba. What is that? If you heard it, you would know. I'll tell you what it is. It's right here. So yes, it sounds like nothing, but Tuomas is interweaving melodies which we're about to hear throughout. That's not to say and dismiss Amy's analysis and claim that it's like a movie score, because movie scores do that. But it's certainly not nothing. And it certainly serves a big and a great purpose in this.
For me, Ghost Love Score was not like that. For example, the beginning of the piece, which is setting up a scene, but then there's no development to it.
No, this is untrue.
It's building up, it's waiting for something to happen, something to come, to bring it to a climax. It never does.
It never does. But what are you talking about? And here's the issue, that there's never really an indication as to whether Amy is talking about to bring it to a climax. How? Rhythmically, melodically, harmonically, texturally. What is Amy trying to explain here? Because the beginning, you don't need a climax at the beginning, you need a climax at the end, which happens for the reasons that I explained harmonically in another video. We spoke about earlier how Tuomas moves from different time signatures and develops that. Take a listen how Tuomas develops the rhythm just in the introduction alone. So what's happening here is this rhythm is set up, da 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 da, ba 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 ba, these 16th notes or these semiquavers in a 6/8 and 5/8 time signature mixed meter, so they're changing between each other. So once that has moved, as we know, as explained earlier, we change to a 4/4 3/4 time signature. And it's interesting, once we get to that 4/4 1 2 3 4, Tuomas is still able to use those semiquavers, those 16th notes now as, I guess, quaver triplets. I know that is a lot of information, but we still have the da 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 feel, even though we're now in 4/4. Take a listen. Here we go. 3 4 da 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 da. In the electric guitar, can you hear it? Da 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 da. Ba 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 bum bum. Da 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 dum. That's development. Like, you can't say that's not development. And I think what Amy is saying here is she couldn't feel like a climax because it moved to this 4/4 3/4 mixed meter time signature unexpectedly, and then didn't really feel like it was building up to something, and then moved quite quickly down to a slower tempo where the melody comes in and doesn't end on the chord that you'd think it would end on, to make it sound final and to make it feel like it's built.
It is simply a repetition of a rhythm, and then for no particular reason it shifts to another rhythmic setup. So to compare
Okay, so for no particular reason it shifts to another rhythmic setup. So I believe that is the part we just looked at, which is where it goes into that verse. The tempo slows right down, and the melody starts. And that's where Amy's confusion is, and I completely 100% understand. But I will be explaining why. She says, for no particular reason. There is a particular reason, and I'm going to come back to that.
And with Mozart, think about Confutatis from his Requiem, which in many ways has the same loud, driving, electric rhythm-like sound. And under that, you have the happening all the time, kind of like the percussive ostinato patterns that we find in rock. But it builds, and it has a shape to it, and it has a direction that it's traveling, and it has a sort of it has a unity and a focus, and it has something within it that you can hold on to.
Interesting. Okay. Mozart's Requiem is probably my favorite Mozart work for subjective reasons, most likely because it was his last work and he died halfway into it. And the second reason is that when I was at university, we sung it in the choir. So I really got used to it, and I really started to appreciate a lot of these themes. So I do know Confutatis, which is number 7 in the entire work, which is 14 parts. Mozart died at Lacrimosa, which is the following one, part 8, allegedly 8 bars into it. So Confutatis was quite literally, most likely, one of the last things that Mozart composed. Therefore, he was at the most advanced compositional, I guess, peak that he could be in his life. Confutatis is indeed powerful, with a really powerful driving rhythm established in the string part, and then plays underneath as the male vocalist sing that melody which Amy played on the piano. Brings back memories. But Amy is referring to Confutatis, which is a self-contained section in a greater work. It's about 3 minutes in length. So the main critique and reason for the Confutatis Ghost Love Score comparison by Amy is here.
It is simply a repetition of a rhythm, and then, for no particular reason, it shifts to another rhythmic setup.
So what is the expected build? What is Amy hoping that is built from this? Because here we have literally 2 parallels. 2 pieces of music with a driving rhythm creating continuity, Ghost Love Score and Confutatis. Whilst Tuomas changes the key early on, lifting it, giving it direction, he keeps moving forward to a new time signature using this now well-established theme. Amy mentions that it's not brought to a climax, which means I feel like this critique is actually not rhythmic, but it's harmonic. In Confutatis, Mozart brings the first section to a climax, ending on chord 5. It's not resolved. It really leaves the listener wanting more. But then Amy says this.
Play something to come, to bring it to a climax. It never does. It is simply a repetition of a rhythm, and then, for no particular reason...
Funny that. Simply a repetition of a rhythm, which, for no particular reason, shifts to another rhythmic setup. I think I've heard this somewhere before. for no particular reason, shifts to another rhythmic setup. So here we've established that Mozart does the same thing. Shift to another rhythmic setup. But Mozart doesn't do that for no particular reason. Composers don't do a certain thing for no particular reason. So we actually can see parallels in these two. Whilst Confutatis does go into this new rhythmic setup, it does give the impression of a slower tempo. However, Mozart manages to keep that tempo the same. Tuomas in Ghost Love Score changes the tempo into the section or the verse where the main vocalist is singing. That being said, Amy could not have picked a better piece to compare the two. They are very much different, of course. Amy's grievances, though, are legitimate. If we view this piece, Ghost Love Score, in the exact same light as Mozart's Confutatis, as you can hear, the first theme returns as we have a back and forth of these two musical ideas. Tuomas's work, Ghost Love Score, though, moves into various seemingly unrelated sections. I can see, though, how this is confusing for Amy if she's taking a small part of a work like Confutatis from Mozart's larger scale work, Requiem in D minor, or Mass in D minor. I spoke about Tuomas taking us on a journey through many different sections. And again, if you haven't seen my analysis on this yet, I have covered some of this. Throughout the different sections, we have different keys and harmonies, some different time signatures, but there is no other section like we have in the introduction. This introduction has such driving rhythms with mixed meter shifting from 6/8 to 5/8. It is an incredibly memorable section of the song for that reason. Tuomas has introduced us to many different ideas throughout the piece of music, but insists on bringing us back to his second idea, the main vocal melody. Because Tuomas has bombarded us with so many different rhythmic, melodic ideas, I don't believe solely bringing back the main melody would be strong enough to unify this whole piece, especially after 8 minutes. So what does Tuomas do? He brings back the most rhythmically contrasting section as a, hey, look what is back. Amy says that there's little unity, but there's greater reason behind it. Tuomas needed this largely contrasting section to help cast our memories back to where it began. I absolutely would not have been able to identify the significance of the main melody on a first listening, the main vocal melody anyway, if this wildly different, innovative introduction was not reintroduced. I remember watching this for the first time, and I remember stating, oh my god, is that the first section again? Whilst Confutatis has 2 sections, Ghost Love Score has many, and it's the ability to take all of these sections and then throw in a reminder later in the piece of music, which Amy criticized as a lack of unity, to ironically unify a piece of music. So I feel like we've hit the crux of Amy's argument here. A lot of the comparison between Ghost Love Score and Mozart was solely from people hailing Tuomas as Metal Mozart. So if you want to watch the rest of her video, it's on her channel. But in a society which consumes music like fast food, little is ever discussed about composers. Which brings me to my conclusion. Little is discussed about composers even in the most famous rock songs. So for Tuomas to be consistently mentioned alongside Nightwish is a testament to him as a composer. Why are James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich from Metallica not constantly hailed as compositional geniuses? Same with Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. I mean, we know the Lennon-McCartney duo, but we can't think about them without thinking about the greatest band or the greatest rock band of all time. I absolutely love Metallica's music, and I actually haven't done anything about them on my channel because I've heard so much of their music. However, their 1999 album, S&M, containing performances of their songs with additional symphonic scoring and accompaniment, couldn't even have been arranged by James or Lars, instead needing Michael Kamen to arrange them. So what do we learn from this? Popular music composition of the 20th century has moved so far away from orchestration, and in composing for small ensembles, these composers often don't have mastery in orchestration and composing for larger ensembles. Yes, their melodies and harmonies are all there, but Metallica needed a renowned orchestrator to redo their songs. Finding an all-in-one composer like Tuomas is rare, and that's why he's known as Metal Mozart. Thank you for watching. Until next time.